I'd like to show you 3 simple but delicious dishes that you can put together to create your own tapas spread. The first I'm going to make is a Spanish tortilla. Now, not a Mexican tortilla, which is a corn tortilla or a wheat tortilla, but a Spanish tortilla is like an omelet that hasn't been folded over, a flat omelet. And it starts with potatoes that have been sliced very, very thin. Let me just slice one more here. Russet potatoes are the potatoes you want to use. And we're going to cook those potatoes in olive oil. There we are. And so here is a hot pan. We'll put some oil in. And as soon as that oil begins to shimmer and move around the pan, as soon as it begins to smile back at me, I'm going to introduce all these potatoes. If you've had them stored in water, just blot them dry a little bit so that they won't spit when they go into the pan. Now, the way that you earn your money when you're making tortilla here is to be careful that you don't cook them too aggressively or too quickly. I don't want these to get brown. I want them to cook, but I don't want them to cook until they're crispy. Because I'm going to put these potatoes into eggs, and I want the eggs to absorb in, and that won't happen when there's a crust on the outside. And the other thing I want to happen is I want the flavor of this delicious olive oil to actually be absorbed into those potatoes, and that won't happen if they fry to a crisp crust on the outside. So, a moderate heat, and periodically come along and scrape them off the bottom. They might stick a little bit. If they do, it's probably indicative of your pan not quite hot enough. All right, so let's let those cook. They'll take, I would say, 4 or 5 minutes to cook, and then I'm going to add some onions to the pan, and we'll cook them another 4 or 5 minutes. Best possible outcome is that the potatoes are tender, and if that means they fall apart a little bit, so be it. Better that they should fall apart than they should be crunchy and inhospitable. While these are cooking, let me go ahead and show you another simple tapa. This one draws its inspiration from your supermarket where you go and you can find olives that are stuffed with garlic, with jalapenos, with cheese, with blue cheese, with pimento. And some enterprising Spanish chef said, why should I let someone else decide what to stuff my olives with? So here are some olives right here. They're pitted. And I'm going to cut these open, not all the way through, just the top. And then we're going to lay into that cut a white anchovy. This is a pickled anchovy, if you will. It's been cured and then soaked for a little while in olive oil and white wine vinegar. On top of the white anchovy, I want to put some roasted pepper. So we'll put that like that, and then just open this this olive up and put that right inside. As I said, you decide exactly what you stuff this olive with. I'll do the same again. We'll open the olive up and take this filling that we've created and put it right inside. Now, give the potatoes a quick stir while they're busy cooking. They're starting to become translucent. There's no browning, so that works for me. Next, I want to make a quick little dressing to go on top of those stuffed olives. And it's going to be simple. So I'm going to put a little garlic in a bowl. I'm going to put some orange zest in that bowl, just so that this dressing is aromatic. And then just a splash of sherry vinegar and a little bit of olive oil, salt, and pepper. And that should be enough. It doesn't take very much. The olives, the anchovies, the roasted peppers all taste great on their own. So, and just test to make sure we're happy with the flavor. And then we're going to spoon this right over the top. And I kind of like it when the orange zest shows, so I'm going to add just a little bit more so that it tells a flavor story. People can see it and they know what to expect. All right, this one is done. I'm going to introduce the onions to this pan, and we'll let those onions cook while the potatoes finish cooking. If you notice, there's no browning. If any of these are sticking together, you can easily come in and separate them. Because we're cooking over a slow fire, the oil that we use in this actually can be used again. It's not a problem. It hasn't started to break down. In another 5 minutes, those potatoes will be tender. Likewise, the onions will be translucent. And at that point, what I want to do is I want to strain those potatoes and onions out of the oil. Let me just set this aside for a second and show you what I have here. So here are some potatoes that have been cooked already, potatoes and onions. You can see the oil that drained off the bottom, and that's oil that we can use. This is going to become our Spanish tortilla. So what I want to do is bind that together with eggs, and we'll take just enough eggs to bind it without a lot of extra egg. I want to season the eggs, just as though you were making some scrambled eggs in the morning. So make sure the seasoning goes in there. And the potatoes, likewise, need to be seasoned. So don't neglect seasoning one component of the dish. Everything wants to be seasoned. And I'll gather up the potatoes and just put them right in here. These potatoes can be cooked ahead. It's actually beneficial to let them cool a little bit, because if we want the egg to absorb into the potato and we add the potatoes hot to the eggs cook on the outside immediately, and that is not the outcome we're after. So make sure that all of the potatoes are nicely coated with egg. And we'll put a pan on the heat. I want to turn it up. And you could use fresh oil, but there's no reason at all that this oil could not be used to make a tortilla. There should not be a lot of liquid egg floating to the surface here. It should be mostly potatoes and onions that have been cooked in a really delicious olive oil that flavor this dish. If you are not too squeamish to do it, I would just check the seasoning one more time so that you know that the finished dish is going to taste the way you like. And then we'll come over, and I want to add some oil to this pan. And when that oil is hot, we're going to put the potatoes in all at once. Here we go. I'm going to make a thin tortilla because I know it will cook more quickly. If you've got the time, you can make it a little bit thicker. Once I see that this moves independent of the pan, then I can turn it down just a little bit. But I want a crust to form on the bottom. And that crust is formed right there. If you want to manipulate this at all, you can. Sort of neaten up the edges. You can do that. And as you look in there, what you notice is not a lot of free egg, just enough to bind the potatoes together. This particular tortilla is just a jumping off point. Some people put ham in there. I've seen them with salt cod, sauteed mushrooms, spinach, in addition to the potatoes and onions. So you can let your imagination and your creativity run a little bit wild. Really what we want to do is make sure that by the time we're ready to turn this, it has a nice golden crust on the other side. So how do you know when you're ready to turn it? Well, already this is moving kind of independent of the pan. And already there's not a lot of liquid egg. I don't want egg to sort of run off when I turn this. So I usually wait 4 minutes, give or take, and evaluate the way it looks. Take a look underneath and make sure I'm happy with the color. And then have available to yourself a lid that you can put on top. Because what we're going to do is turn this whole thing over and then slide it back in the pan. If you are uncomfortable with using a lid, and you want to use something a little bit larger, you could use a plate like this, but a lid seems to work pretty well for me. For safety's sake, oftentimes I just roll my sleeve down. I don't anticipate any problems, but better safe than sorry. You put the lid on, and what we're going to do is lift it up, turn it over, and then we're going to slide the omelet back into the pan. When you do it, you have to have a certain level of confidence that you're going to succeed. You can't go halfway over and then let your confidence falter, because if you do, your dinner's on the floor. All right, so here's what it looks like. Here's 1, 2, and up and over, and we're done. Okay? Now, if you want to put a small amount of oil back into the pan, you can. And then with your spatula, just ease this right back in so that it can cook on the second side. And while the liquid egg on the bottom side has not quite cooked, I like to take a spatula and just shape it so that it has an attractive kind of uniform look to it. Just tuck the edges underneath, if you will. This will be ready and cooked on the second side probably within 2 minutes. So what I'm going to do is show you one last tapa before we plate this up. And this is kind of a fun one too, and it's also very simple to do. These are padron peppers, and they're becoming very, very popular right now. The nature of these peppers is that as they mature, they get a little bit spicy. And if you can harvest them small, then they won't be too spicy. But if you let them get too big, then they will get hot. Sometimes they're called roulette peppers because every 8, 10, 12, you'll get one that's a little spicy. And the tradition is that if you get that pepper, you're the one who buys the next round. Anyhow, we're going to saute these really hot to blister the outsides and to soften the flesh just a little bit. So get a pan nice and hot. Get some olive oil into that pan. And when that oil begins to creep in the pan, and I know it's hot, then I'm going to introduce the peppers. You might even wait for the first wisp or two of gray smoke to come off this pan. While that's heating up, you can evaluate the texture and the doneness of this just by giving it a little poke, and it should be firm. I'm going to turn off this pan, and we'll let the residual heat of that pan just bring this to completion. So there's some smoke coming out of this pan. In goes our padrones. I'll turn it down just a hair. And really what you want to do is blister these. And you'll see very quickly the skin will blister a little bit. If you look now, you can already see some blackening. That's just the way it should be. Blistering, blistering, blistering. These take a minute, if that. A lot of it depends on how hot your stove is, but these go pretty quickly. If you're not comfortable tossing them, it's an easy thing to take your tongs and manipulate them just this way. This is my favorite way of manipulating them, just tossing them like that. And once they're nicely blistered over, let's say, 50 to 75% of the surface, then they are ready to be served. First, our tortilla. Let me just move that. While the pan is still hot, I'm just going to move this a little bit to keep them in motion. I'm going to slide the tortilla out onto a plate. And we'll set that right there. I'm going to take these peppers and I want to put them onto a plate as well. And the only thing they need for dressing is a squeeze of lemon juice and some good quality salt. So I've got some sea salt right here. Don't be shy with the salt. They actually taste better if they're aggressively seasoned. And then lemon juice. Patron peppers are done. With the tortilla, oftentimes I will serve a little bit of garlic mayonnaise. And if you want to dress it up a little bit, it's an easy thing to do, to just take and tuck some parsley in here around the edges. I would say that a tortilla like this, you might cut into, let's say, 8 small slices. So this could easily be a nice tortilla, a nice tapas spread for 8 separate people, along with a glass of sherry. I think this is a great way to begin a meal, or before a meal. One quick thing about tapas is that the tapas tradition is actually separate from a meal. You might choose to go out to a bar and enjoy tapas and sherry or beer or wine, and then go home and later on eat your dinner. So tapas as a tradition, oftentimes separate from a meal. Anyhow, salud. So I'm going to lean on another member of the allium family, the leek, and I'm going to make a leek pizza with potatoes and Teleme cheese, and maybe even a little drizzle of truffle oil. So the big challenge with leeks is this, that the desirable part of the leek is this white portion on the bottom, and the people who grow them try to maximize the amount of white by mounding dirt up and protecting the leek from the sun. And the higher they mound the dirt, the more likelihood that dirt will make its way down inside the leek. So you have to be very careful how you clean them. Let me show you how to do that. First thing we're going to do is we're going to cut off the root end and discard that. And then I'm going to begin to take some of these green tops off. We don't want those either. And I'm going to cut it in half. And just so that you can see what I mean, there, for instance, is a little bit of dirt that's right on the inside. As I peel this back, you'll find dirt throughout. Sometimes it's just at the tip, and other times it goes down. So the answer to that is just wash them very, very well. I'm going to cut this into thin slices. I'm going to put these into a bowl of cool water and then go ahead with the second. So we're going to wash this, rub it between your palms a little bit to dislodge the dirt. And recognize that the dirt is heavier than the leeks. So the leeks are floating, and the dirt should be sinking down to the bottom of the bowl. So what I would encourage you not to do is don't put a colander in the sink and take this whole thing and just dump it into the colander when you drain it, because what will happen is all the dirt at the bottom will be poured right back on top of the leeks. That doesn't make any sense at all. Instead, my suggestion would be something like this. Take these out of the water and leave the dirt behind. And if when you do that, you discover that the water is really dirty, you might want to choose to wash them a second time in a fresh bowl of water. These look pretty good to me. So the next step is to take these leeks and we're going to cook them kind of slowly in butter. This is clarified butter. And what I want to happen is I want these things to get very, very tender without browning. So we browned the onions for the onion soup very dark, but this I don't want to brown. What I do want to happen, however, is I want them to get very, very tender. So they may take, as much as 10, 15 minutes to cook. Regulate the heat so that it's not too aggressive. And if you see them browning, you're cooking them too quickly. This is not really sautéing. This would be called sweating. We're going to sweat them so that they soften and tenderize without color. I can go ahead and start the seasoning process. We'll put a little salt on here and pepper as well. And we'll move on. Next on our pizza, potatoes that have been cooked in butter. And I'm going to slice them on a mandolin. This is the easy way to do it. And we'll cook these in butter as well until they're tender. And again, I'm not really looking to sauté these and brown them. Instead, I'd much prefer if they softened without taking on a tremendous amount of color. And they'll probably take the same, 10 minutes, 15 minutes that the leeks will. Since we're making pizza, I've got the oven on already, and while it comes up to temperature, I'd like to show you something a little bit different that we can use the oven for. Here's a head of garlic, and what I'd like to do is roast that garlic, and so inside this papery husk, we get this wonderful, soft, creamy, mild garlic flavor. And it's a really pretty simple thing to do. Take the garlic clove, and if there's a lot of loose papery husks on the outside, just wipe them away. And then we're going to cut the top off, not from the root end, but from the stem end. We're going to cut the top off so that most of the garlic cloves are open and exposed to the seasoning I'm going to add. Just going to trim a little bit around the outside. There we are. All right, Now that we've got all of these cloves exposed, I'm going to take some olive oil and just drizzle it over the top and let it soak down into the garlic. I'm going to season it with salt and pepper. And we're going to wrap this up We're just going to pop that into the oven at about 350, 375 degrees, and it'll take probably about 45 minutes. You'll be able to monitor its progress not by opening it up, but just by giving it a squeeze every now and then, and you'll feel incrementally the garlic will get softer and softer and softer. When it's nice and soft, you can open it up, and you want to see the cloves of garlic just beginning to turn golden. So we'll pop that into the oven. So my leeks are cooked, likewise my potatoes. My garlic has been in the oven for about 45 minutes, and just before I took it out, I turned the oven all the way up because that's what pizza's like. Let's take a look here and see what we've got. Yep, just as I'd hoped. You can see that the garlic is tender. If I give it a little squeeze, it's very, very soft. And all of the cloves have just started to turn a nice golden brown. I'm going to take that, and I'll tell you how I like to use it. I have here some croutons and a cheese that you may know, Cambozola, which is delicious. I've made myself sick on it many times over. And what I love to do is I love to take a little bit of the Cambozola and spread it on a crouton. And then with the same small knife, dip in here and pull out some of this soft, soft garlic and add that to the same crouton. So this might be a wonderful appetizer to enjoy before you eat your pizza. But let me set that aside, and we're going to get started with pizza. I've got pizza dough here. I just bought some pizza dough. You can make it yourself if you'd like. And we're going to take a round of pizza dough, flour it lightly, and then begin this process of just making a little crown around the outside. Little bit of a crown. That will ultimately be the pizza crust. All right? And then we're going to flatten the center. And we can begin this process of picking it up and stretching the dough. I'm not really stretching that crown, and neither am I stretching the inside. I'm just stretching the outside a little by little. So you can see now easily it's twice the size, but I want to go thinner still. And I'm letting gravity help me. Gravity is sort of pulling the dough down, and I'm stretching it side to side. And finally, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take it. Now it's pretty thin. I'm going to put it on the back of my hands like this and begin this process of just stretching it a little bit further. Back of my hands so that my fingers don't poke through. And I feel pretty good about that. Okay? That looks pretty good. So we're going to take that, and I'm going to put it on a board. And then we're going to put first some leeks on here. These are the leeks that have been melted in butter. I seasoned them with salt and pepper. They're very, very tender. Think of this as your pizza sauce. All right, next, I'm going to add some of these potatoes. And the potatoes are already cooked and tender. I seasoned them with salt and pepper. Maybe think of this as pepperoni. Vegetable, though. Now, we're going to put some cheese on here. I've got a cheese that's a local cheese, Teleme. You'll find it here in California. And like really good fresh mozzarella, you can just break it into pieces and it'll melt and begin to spread. You don't really need to slice it or grate it. In fact, it's pretty difficult to grate because it's so soft. As this cheese ages, it gets softer and softer, and it gets a little bit runny after a while. It might surprise you. It comes packaged with rice flour on the outside, so it feels a little bit dusty. but that's exactly as it should be. And then finally, Teleme is pretty mild, so we're going to put a stronger cheese. You could use Parmesan or Pecorino. What I have here is a local cheese called Dry Jack, and there's a large piece of it there. It comes coated on the outside with cocoa powder and black pepper. Anyhow, we trimmed it, we've grated it, and I'm going to use that just for a little cheesy bite. Salt, pepper, and before we go to the oven, let's just make sure that this is moving. There we go. That's what you want to see. Don't go to the oven until you're confident that we're ready to go. I'm going to make it just a little bit larger, and we'll go to the oven. I'll open it up. It's hot. We've got the pizza stone in the back. I move this right to the back, and then in it goes. All right, so it's been about 8 or 10 minutes. I think our pizza is done. Let's go give it a look. I'm going to slide it back onto this board. So as you can notice, I'm using a pizza stone in the oven, which makes a huge difference when you're baking pizza. The reality is that the stone captures and holds on to extra heat, and when the pizza hits it, it just begins to bake immediately. Just put a little parsley on the top here. And now sometimes when I make this pizza, I will add a drop or two of truffle oil to sort of bring out the earthiness of the potatoes. If you have it on hand, it's nice to have one more thing to do with it because it seems like a jar of truffle oil lasts and lasts and lasts. There we go. All right, who doesn't like pizza? So we've got a delicious pizza where the sauce is basically melted leeks, Teleme cheese, potatoes. I think it's a great combination. I've got a chicken right here. This is a Poussin, a very small chicken. Now, as a rule of thumb, an older animal has more flavor than a younger animal, and an older animal has more fat than a younger animal. So this is a very young chicken. Its flavor is going to be mild, and I'm going to cook it so that it gets a lot of browning and season it assertively and serve it with a salad that has a lot of flavor. We've already roasted a chicken, and it took us about an hour and a half, maybe an hour and a quarter. I want to show you a way that we can roast this chicken very, very quickly. I'm going to do something called spatchcocking this chicken. That's what they call it in England. In France, they call it chicken crépodine. What I'm going to do is cut the spine out of this bird. So here's the breast, the two legs and the wings. I'm going to flip it over. There's the neck. And I'm going to cut on either side of the neck with a pair of poultry shears and just cut the spine right out of this chicken. There's a little bit of extra skin here that I'm not going to need. I'll take that and get rid of it. Now I can open this bird up, and I'm looking at the inside of the keel bone or the inside of the breastbone. I'm going to take my knife and cut the cartilage closest to the wings, just like that, and then glide my knife just over the top of that bone. And if I bend it back, what you'll see happening is the keel bone will almost pop out. And you just get in here and peel it away. And the bone broke into two pieces, and I'll tell you why. This portion of the bone right here has already calcified. It feels like a bone. This portion right here is still cartilage. As this chicken gets older, those two pieces will fuse together and the whole thing will stop being cartilage and start becoming bone. This is an indication of how young this bird is. With the breastbone out, take a look. This chicken lays nice and flat. And if I was roasting it, it would take a long time to cook, but because I'm going to roast it flat like this, it should cook very quickly. I'm going to take the wings and trim those off as well at what I call the elbow. So here is what would be the shoulder, the elbow, the wrist, and that is the hand. There's a sweet spot at the joint, and I cut right through there, and that comes out. That is a spatchcocked chicken, and I'm going to cook it skin side down. I'm even going to put a brick on top of it to weight it down against the pan so that the skin gets nice and golden and crispy. I've got a pan that's pretty hot already. I'm going to turn it up nice and high. I've got a brick here that I covered with foil, and I've had it in the oven for a while at 475 degrees, so it's hot already too. While we wait for the pan to heat up, I'm going to season this chicken with salt and a little bit of pepper. We'll flip it over. More salt, a little bit of pepper, and I'm going to put just a splash of oil there and the balance in the pan. I'll just rub this oil into the chicken. And as I look at this, the thickness is such that I anticipate maybe 20 minutes, probably closer to 18. It's going to cook very, very quickly. So it's not going to be in the oven for a long time, so the oven needs to be turned up pretty high. If I want to get browning, because it's not going to be in there for very long, high temperature. I'm thinking 475, 500 degrees. So I'm just starting to see a little bit of smoke coming off of this oil. That means the oil is as hot as I can get it without it breaking down. I'm going to take this chicken and I want to put it into the pan skin side down. That sizzle is a good sound. Now, we're going to leave it on this side until I get nice grill marks from the ridges in this grill pan. It should only take a minute or two. All right, let's take a look at this bird. As you can see, there's some nice color beginning to develop on this bird. I'm going to turn it 90 degrees. And so that it stays in close contact, I have this brick that I have wrapped in foil, and I put it in the oven. It's pretty hot, and I'm going to put that right on top of the chicken to hold the skin in close contact with the pan below. This is going to go into the oven at about 500 degrees, and it shouldn't take more than 15 to 18 minutes. Okay, we're about 20 minutes in on this chicken. Let me take the brick off, and we'll see what we've got. It's not a very large bird, and so I could serve this as a portion, but more realistically, I think, if I cut it in half, right where the keel bone used to be, and then think about separating the leg from the breast, and move that over to the salad. I'm going to take this leg, we'll put that on there as well. In just 20 minutes, using the technique of spatchcocking, I have a meal ready to go on the table. That's a great technique. start with the spaghetti squash. I want to cook this, and when it's cooked, I'll shred it into fibers, and we're going to make a Southeast Asian salad with chicken and fruit and a really spicy dressing. So first order of business is to cut this squash in half. Once I've cut it in half, if there's any seeds or loose fibers, I'm going to scrape those out, much the way you might clean a pumpkin if you were making a jack-o'-lantern. And we'll put that into a pot of boiling salted water, and it will take about 4 to 6 minutes to get tender. At home, if you've got a microwave, I know a lot of chefs who just pop it into the microwave, set it on 3 minutes, and then come and check it. If it's not tender, they give it another minute or two. And they swear by it as a technique. So there's another option. And while our squash is getting tender, let's go ahead and start to build a salad. I'm going to make a dressing. And the dressing includes fish sauce. And in the Southeast Asian recipe, typically when you see fish sauce, you'll see also lime juice and sugar. The sugar and the fish sauce complement one another because fish sauce is very salty. And so you add sugar to the fish sauce until you achieve a balance between sweetness and saltiness. And by that balance, I mean you can notice both of those tastes, but neither predominates, okay? It might surprise you how much sugar it takes to make that happen. We've got a lot of vegetable matter, a lot of fruit going in, so we need a really assertive dressing. No need to add salt and pepper. Why? Because there's plenty of salt already in the fish sauce. And for pepper's sake, I'm going to go to my refrigerator and see what I've got in terms of chili paste. This is a Thai chili sauce. It's a sweetened chili sauce, and I'm going to add that just to bring a little fire to bear. Okay, so what's going to go into our salad? Well, I've got some grapes here, and I've taken them. They're seedless grapes, 2 colors, red and green. And I've cut some in half, and those are going to go into the dressing. I have an apple, and I'm going to cut the flesh away from the core. Send that to the compost heap, and we'll dice this up. And so that it doesn't darken, we're going to put that right into the dressing as well. Next, I've got a chicken breast. And this chicken breast was poached, but if you had leftover roasted chicken breast, that would be appropriate as well. And what I want to do is cut this into smaller pieces. And then sort of shred it. I don't want to cut it into a little dice. I think that looks a little too predictable. So we'll shred it like this. It'll give a nice rustic look to our salad, and it doesn't take that much longer. Over here, the pot has come to a boil. And give the spaghetti squash a minute or two to start cooking, and then monitor its progress. You don't want it to get too soft. Better that it should be a little undercooked than overcooked. Chicken right into the dressing. I'm just going to toss it so that it can absorb some of that flavor. And let's look in on our squash. I'm going to pull it out here and just begin to scratch away at it a little bit. You can see that it's starting to get tender, and it's starting to pull away into fibers like that. It's not quite done yet, but it's close. So we'll carry on. I'm going to add scallions to my salad. And maybe I'll save some of the green tops to go on after the fact, and we'll put these right in the dressing. Peanuts, I'm going to chop those as well. I'm not going to add these because I want them to stay nice and crisp, so we'll put them onto our salad just before we serve it. Let's check in on our squash. And if you notice, as I scratch away at it, it falls apart into these filaments. That's exactly what I'm looking for. I'm going to turn the pot off, and I'm going to rescue this from the hot water. And because it's hot, I'll just wrap it in a towel, and let's go ahead and scratch this from the shell. Now, certainly you don't have to do this while it's as hot as mine is. I want to move things along here, but you could let it cool on the countertop for just a second. And what I want to do with that squash is just put it into a big bowl of ice water and cool it down and rinse off any of the starch that's on the outside. And so once it's cool and rinsed, I'm going to spin it in a salad spinner. And these shreds I'll leave behind. What I'd like to do is add some of the spaghetti squash right to my salad. I'm going to toss this all together and make sure that everything is coated well with the dressing. A quick taste. Splash more lime juice, and I'm pretty happy with the flavor. Now, Southeast Asia, Vietnam especially, is known for being a cuisine of fresh herbs. And so I've got some herbs right here. I've been soaking them in ice water so they're nice and fresh. And I'm going to take them out. This is a great way of reviving herbs that may have gotten a little tired in your refrigerator. And what I have here is a couple of different things. I have mint, I have cilantro, and I have Thai basil. And I'm going to take the mint from the stems. Maybe I'll save that for garnish. We'll collect this together, and I'm going to slice it into sort of big pieces. I think people expect a pretty robust dish, and they want to be able to taste all these different herbs. So this is something more than just a sprinkling of parsley. This is really a component of the dish. It's really going to be a big part of its flavor. Take those herbs, toss them into the salad, and then we're going to serve it while the herbs are nice and fresh and lively and aromatic. At this point, we can put peanuts into the salad. I'll put some more of these green onion tops. I'm going to take advantage of these grapes and just tuck them onto the same plate. We'll add some mint. And then garnish this with the green onions and the remainder of the peanuts. Okay, so there's a delicious Southeast Asian salad that features fruit, chicken, aromatic herbs, and spaghetti squash. If you've never used spaghetti squash before, this is a great introduction to what it can do in your kitchen.
I'm a huge fan of Panna Cotta. It has the rich, luxurious quality of a custard, but in fact, it's not a custard. It's a dairy-based dessert that's thickened with gelatin. When we're using gelatin, the first step is that you have to hydrate it. And actually, I don't have any water in this recipe, but I can use some milk. I'm going to take a portion of milk and pour it into this bowl. When we're hydrating gelatin, or a step we call blooming, you want to sprinkle the gelatin over a surface, broad surface of, in this case, the milk, so that it will hydrate quickly and evenly. If I had had the milk, for example, in this container, I wouldn't have very much surface area for distributing the gelatin. I'm going to take it and use my fingers and just sort of sprinkle it gradually over the surface of the milk. My milk is cold, but it doesn't have to be ice cold. But you cannot hydrate gelatin in a warm liquid, so it's important that our milk is actually cool. Take the time to do this carefully. If you splash the gelatin or don't get it actually evenly distributed across the top of the milk, it's possible that it wouldn't become fully hydrated and you have some little bits of undissolved gelatin, which are not going to be very good to eat. It takes about 5 minutes to properly hydrate gelatin after I've got this evenly sprinkled over the top. During that time, you'll see the surface of the bowl becomes very, very rippled. Looks really interesting. If I'm very cautious, I can use a whisk to help facilitate this process also. I'm going to cut through the top, expose a little bit of new milk so the gelatin can become equally hydrated. I chose deliberately not to use the whisk in the first place because gelatin, as it's starting to blossom or bloom here, will hold air. I don't want to have a lot of air across the top of the surface of my finished dessert. It looks a little unattractive if it's full of bubbles. That's good. I'm just going to leave that here for a few minutes now. Let's move on to the next portion of the recipe. Panna Cotta literally means cooked cream. I'm going to take some cream and put it into a pot over here. Add some sugar and allow this sugar to dissolve. Now I'm choosing today to flavor my panna cotta with vanilla. Of course, I could have used a vanilla bean also, but there's so many other possibilities. Panna cotta is so incredibly versatile, and that's one of the reasons for its popularity. Anything that I choose, I could infuse into this mixture, like a vanilla bean, coffee beans, cinnamon sticks, or perhaps some orange zest or something like that. You can also use any type of a liquid flavoring. I am going to use vanilla extract, but I might also use a liqueur. I could use any type of fruit puree, for example. Maybe substitute some fruit puree for a little bit of the milk in the recipe in the first place for another really great variation. Another really popular variation is to use milk products that are a little acidic, like buttermilk or yogurt or creme fraiche. They make for a really nice variation also. Very rich. And at the same time, it doesn't come across as being so rich because the gelatin gives it a really nice, silky mouthfeel. Gelatin's looking pretty good. It's had about ample opportunity to bloom now. And I bring my cream up to a boil. Now the sugar's dissolved. Panna Cotta, for today, I'm going to pour into a couple variations of dishes over here. Another possibility is actually to pour it into a mold like a ramekin, like the ramekin that we used for the creme caramel. If it's had sufficient time to chill, say overnight, then we can even turn it out of that mold, serve it on a plate with some sauce. Okay, my cream's at a boil. I'm just going to pour that hot cream into the bloomed gelatin mixture here. Stir it around so that it's thoroughly dissolved. You know, gelatin is an animal-based product, so this dessert is not suitable for vegetarians. I'm going to add a little vanilla extract now. And I have some reserved milk. I actually like to hold back some of the milk because the mixture now is hot. If I pour this directly into the dish, it will take a lot longer for it to cool off before I'm ready to use it, and it won't gel unless it's cold. So if I hold back a little of the milk, I can add it now. It'll be that much cooler. It'll set that much faster. Also, you might notice that if you pour it hot into a dish, it may end up separating into layers with the cream sort of floating up to the top. Let's strain this now through a fine mesh sieve just to make sure that I don't have any undissolved bits of gelatin. Of course, if I was using a vanilla bean, or if I had been using some cinnamon sticks or something to make an infusion, I'd be careful to try to strain that out now too. Be careful not to spill. Okay, so I have a couple of possibilities, a martini glass or a white wine glass or just a nice little dessert dish. You can see the mixture is totally fluid right now. It will take several hours for this to set up in the refrigerator. Panna Cotta is really useful in that way because I can make it in advance. For example, if I'm having a party, I might want to make this a day in advance, and it will be nice for a couple of days. I have some panna cotta that I made a little bit earlier. Let's take a look and see how well it's setting up. You can see when I wiggle the dish, it's still a little bit soft. This will set up if we leave it in the refrigerator. This has been in the refrigerator for several hours already. If we leave it for a little bit longer, it'll become that much firmer. Panna cotta is incredibly easy, and it just has so much variation and versatility. It's one of my all-time favorites.